Our next speaker is Robert Willms, Chief Executive Officer of Optaros. He's an expert in digital commerce with more than 2 decades of experience helping global brands improve the scale and profitability of their customer and prospect relationships. His career spans senior leadership in digital advertising, technologies, and cross-capability strategy and management. Some of the brands he has served include General Motors, Sears, Neiman Marcus, LL Bean, JCPenney, Best Buy, and Timberland. Before joining Optaros in 2011, Robert was founder and CEO of Digital Arbor, Inc., a digital production and technology services provider. Earlier, he worked at Digitas in various executive capacities and at Bain & Company's strategic consulting practice in Canada. Please welcome Robert Willms.
Thanks very much, Jim. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Following these 2 speakers, there is sort of some coming together of topics. I'll try to talk about it a different way. What's really important to understand is that when brands like this and retailers have these kinds of problems, that's what Optaros does. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is a combination of my background, observations in the marketplace, a little bit of research, and some real experience that we've had in solving these problems from a technology standpoint. I don't think it comes as any surprise to most of you, and I think there's a pretty diverse group of people here, that retail commerce is changing profoundly, and that one of the big drivers of that is technology and the digital landscape. And it's unquestionable that both consumer behavior and consumer expectations are changing dramatically as a result of this, and that it's creating a lot of both disruption but also opportunity. I wanted to start by sharing with you a short montage of some feet-on-the-street opinion about how consumers feel about shopping and about technology.
I love to shop. I shop way too much.
I shop all the time.
I do consider myself a shopper. I do.
You look good. You look good.
Yeah, but you shop a lot.
I love to look. I love to buy. I love to bring home. I like the changing technology. It definitely makes it easier.
Not having to wait in line to get rung up. You can do it right there with your salesperson. Everything's done.
The e-receipt is really nice. I like that rather than carrying around a bunch of stuff.
Who likes dressing rooms? So any technology that could help me envision how something would look on me.
I love the digital wallet technology. I have it on my phone, but I have yet to set it up. I find it so fascinating.
I expect companies to know who I am when I log on, maybe even when I go into the physical store.
Word of mouth through technology has a huge impact.
I see a lot on Facebook, like some of my favorite stores, they'll put like outfits on and I'll see that I like it.
I want a proper multi-channel experience.
I don't want to go on my phone and have that app be not the same as what I had seen on my computer.
I prefer to be on, home computer with good internet, so I don't have any of those hang-ups because they just kind of ruins the experience.
I would describe my shopping habits as looking online first and then going to the store.
I usually like to go in-store to actually try the product or see how it actually feels.
There's an app on your iPhone where you can scan the code on something and it'll pull it up and it'll show you the prices in all the stores.
So I want to make sure that I get the best deal, so I'm probably comparing prices on my phone constantly every time I'm shopping. I do shop online, mostly Amazon because of their eclectic mix of product. I can buy anything and everything.
eBay I'm on a lot.
The risk about buying online for me is that you don't always get the style or the fit or the cut that you expect it to get.
As far as this quality goes, if it's like really cheap when I get it, I usually won't order from them again. So there's like so many options now that you don't have to.
You go to the store and they don't have it. So there's that, issue. That's the worst thing because that upsets you and you don't want to go back to that store again.
Mostly what gets me to the stores are I get coupons via email.
30% off, 10% off, loyalty rewards is a big thing for me.
Sometimes I grab something, sometimes I put it on a wish list, and sometimes I X out really quick before I overload my credit cards.
Everybody's trying to streamline everything and make it easy for me as the shopper.
Technology's changed everything. Thank you, guys.
All right, thanks. Come on.
Bye.
Well, perhaps technology hasn't changed everything, but it's changed a lot. I'm going to try to take a short time I have with you today to do a couple of things. I'm going to talk very briefly about some observations of the overall digital commerce market, its scale, and its complexity. And then I'm going to try to focus on really 3 areas of digital disruption that we think that you all need to be thinking about And at the end, I'll make some recommendations or share some thoughts on how you can respond to that. John Donahoe, the CEO of eBay, in speaking on CNBC a couple months ago, shared that in 2011, U.S. retail sales exceeded $10 trillion in the U.S. That includes a lot of things like convenience stores and gas stations, but still a huge volume of transactions. He also went on to say that 50% of the time in those transactions, consumers were accessing the web at some point in the decision process. And that's a profound change that we're seeing. Only a few years ago, from a digital agency standpoint, we used to help businesses think through how to influence customers to drive them to a retail store or to help them through a catalog using a pretty simple, very linear purchase funnel. Brands needed to invest in brand awareness. They needed to drill down into getting consumers to consider their products, and they needed to, hopefully, push some trial and get some conversion. And if they were smart, they were thinking about building a relationship with that consumer afterwards. They had a few choices in which they had to do that. I think today's marketer needs to think about something very differently in terms of how to influence customers. This is a piece of Forrester research. I think it's based on some work that a colleague of mine, David Edelman, did at McKinsey & Company. But what's very true today is that the consumer purchase journey is neither linear nor is it predictable. And that we have a situation today where there's a growing number of ways that consumers interact with brands and interact with retailers that are both physical and digital. And what's really important to understand is that the consumer decides when and how to act. And so that's a very, very large change that I think people need to be cognizant of. I think there's been a couple of questions this morning about how to invest in these kinds of channels, or what percentage do you need to look at. There's some research out there that's probably a little bit old, but that says that consumers are spending a greater than 40% of their total media consumption time engaged in digital channels. If my teenage children are an indication, that's probably pretty low. There's some other research out there that says retailers are spending less than 20% of their total customer influence investments, both human resources and budgets and the like, on trying to reach and influence customers in those channels. And so the gap is very large, and I think that it is challenging for a lot of you to try to catch up to reaching consumers where they are. What we're also hearing from a lot of our clients is the vast majority of their US growth projections are coming not from physical stores, but from digital platforms. And that is, again, something where there is a fairly large gap. So sort of in that environment, I want to try to talk just about three core areas of digital disruption. The first is really starting from the view of the consumer. And I think it's just terrific to hear both Daniela and Kelly talk about the customer insights they get. I think Kelly's extremely fortunate to have 90% of their customers or their transactions in an identifiable customer base. Not all of you have that opportunity. I also wanted to talk about the tension between this need for relevant, content-rich experiences and the technologies that are available to enable those. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. I think that there's a question about what comes first. Is it customer demand or is it the enablement? But finding that right mix relevant to your brands and your customer base is going to be super important. And I think this concept of omni-channel is also very important. A couple of short years ago, a lot of our clients were asking us, I'm pretty worried about what's happening in sort of outside marketplaces and in some of my digital-only competitors, the Amazons, the eBays of the world, or people that are coming into a channel without the history of bricks and mortar. I think now what a lot of these businesses are understanding is that their bases of competition can be on their ability to leverage their assets, but also requires them to go a little deeper into the channel. I'll try to go through this fairly quickly, but this consumers gaining control is a super important thing to recognize. I think traditionally there has been a lot of thought about push and pull marketing, about an active consumer or a passive consumer. And I think I don't have to go into much detail. based on what Kelly and Daniela just said, consumers are really determining when they shop, how they're going to engage with you, and they're using technology to be much smarter and much more nimble. There's also a lot going on in really two broad categories around do not. There are some regulatory things, do not email me, do not call me. There's some blockage to traditional investments in trying to influence customers, but there's also a growing amount of do not violate my trust, do not behave in a way that doesn't match my social consciousness or my ability to kind of connect with the community. This ubiquitous access, always on, leads to a transparency for your brand that you have to be able to respond to. And it is really, really quick when you do something wrong or you do something right. And the ability to both evangelize your brand and criticize your brand is pretty wide open in today's marketplace. There's also a lot of research that's been done around an erosion in trust around messaging coming from corporations. It's a little bit of skepticism, and you don't have to have violated that trust to fall into this category, and it's changing the basis of what drives loyalty. There's been a lot of talk this morning about social influence, and we think about social importance in the commerce world a little bit differently than just Facebook and Pinterest. It really is leveraging people's sense of community. They're looking for validation. And I think there's a lot of things that can be done in commerce that is in concert with this slight erosion in trust about what you tell them and their greater dependency on their peer groups. And there is an expectation of relevance, and particularly in the value exchange. If you want consumers to engage with you, provide information to you, they want and expect both relevance and recognition in return. And then the final thing that I think is becoming incredibly clear in this very complex world is consumers are gravitating and rewarding simplicity. If you can help them, if you can stop your marketing and advertising and commerce activities from being an intrusion into what they're trying to do and become more of a service, I think it has a huge, impactful benefit for the brand. Sort of changing directions a little bit, this growing technical complexity in how to support these experiences is pretty profound. 5 short years ago, there were really 2 broad categories of how consumers how brands were enabling commerce. The first one was there's some commercial available software or like essentially end-to-end solutions, and that represented about 50% of the market. These tended to be large projects taking greater than a year, often costing more than $10 million for large corporations, or asking you to give up a very significant percent of the sales that were done in the case of a category like GSI Commerce. And the other half of the world was really things that were homegrown or custom solutions. And those 2 markets were pretty straightforward. There were pretty straightforward choices, and they tended to result in commerce solutions that looked like a catalog. They were tree-based solutions. They were not very good at aiding shopping. They were really selling. And we have this intersection, as I mentioned, of this demand for content, the proliferation of channels, and this consumer expectation change that, again, is very, very significant in adding to complexity. And it really is a situation now, and this is a graphic that was produced from some research that came out of Luna Partners, and it really illustrates the complexity of the landscape of the technologies that are available between consumers and merchants in the commerce world. These are starting to enable very different business models. We're seeing big challenges in what the nature of competition has been in retail and how traditional bricks and mortar or digital-only retailers are reacting to these competitive forces and these technology choices are becoming very difficult. Most organizations find this complexity overwhelming in terms of their internal ability to perform against it. Brian Walker from Forrester Research did about a year's long research working with retailers in the commerce space, and one of the statements he made, and I won't get it as a direct quote, but yesterday's fairly straightforward e-commerce projects have been today's business, customer experience, and technology transformational programs. And that most organizations are overwhelmed in their ability to kind of deal with these problems and keep up with the need for speed. I won't spend a lot of time talking about omni-channel, but there's no question that the consumer is actively engaged across multiple touch points, both digital and physical, if you offer them both of those opportunities. We're seeing technology, as the previous two speakers talked about, come back into the retail environment, whether it's kiosks or point-of-sale devices, payment enhancements. This technology world that we're facing really needs to provide both an ability to let the consumer engage how and when they want, but it also is a great challenge and a great opportunity to get that kind of customer insight that Kelly talked about that came out of the loyalty program that they have. Not everyone has that kind of penetration, but ComScore just did some research, and the greatest single threat to taking advantage of this marketplace, according to retailers that were surveyed, is their inability to have a 360-degree view of the consumer. And how you enable these touch points, how you integrate them into a back office becomes very, very important. I don't think I have to tell you that mobile is another significant game changer in this world. Between May 2011 and May 2012, Rich Relevance measured a 250% increase in mobile's share of commerce transactions. And that, again, is very, very different. Ben Fishman, who is the CEO of a company called Rue La La, it's an online-only, private event-driven business model, now is seeing greater than 45% of their total transactions occur on an or on a tablet device, primarily an iPad. And that is up from about 15% 18 months ago. A profound change. Part of that is they enabled that channel very differently. So when we think about commerce and commerce technology and what you need to be able to do these things, we think really in three broad categories of what we'll call digital commerce enablement, because it's far beyond just e-commerce now with all the channels and touch points that we need to talk about. There's a layer around what the customer sees, that experience that you give them, and certainly rich, branded, channel-relevant content is very, very important, but so is speed and flexibility and the ability to get that technology in place. So there's also a very big change in this ecosystem, and it really comes from what the industry is starting to talk about is the consumerization of IT. Instead of having a digital commerce or an e-commerce capability specifically, they are literally looking at how can they turn their entire IT infrastructure to be more friendly to enable all the channels, and we think that's going to be a profound change in the way technology talks about. It's a company called Durlocker Research that has done this for several channels. This actually comes out of their mobile commerce report, and there's a curve to these kinds of technology enhancements where there's hype through a disappointment. That disappointment usually is both for the consumer and for the business. When technology can't keep up with strategy, there's a period where technology does catch up and realism takes place, and that's the point we grow. We very strongly believe that we're at an inflection point right now where technology has caught up with the ability to deliver strategy, and that we are going to see profound and sustained growth in this channel. So what do you do about that? So very quickly, I want to share some thoughts. One is you need to evaluate your e-commerce ecosystem. You need to think about how all of these touch points can be enabled, and really you need to do that with the focus on flexibility, scalability, and speed to innovation. We see clients typically wanting projects broken down into 3 or 6 month timeframes, not 18 or 24 months like they used to be, because it's very important. I think this was mentioned a couple of times, but organizational silos, you have to get out of silos. The e-commerce business needs to be very, very exposed to the rest of the business, and getting out of those, both product silos and geographic silos, are very important. Understand the 360-degree view of the customer, get that data, draw that insight, learn from it, and drive change from it. And I think everyone's talked about provide across all of your touch points, a much more consistent branded experience, but it can be channel relevant. It doesn't need to be exactly the same. We're encouraging many of our customers, or our customers are encouraging us to think beyond a single URL. There are technology challenges in a lot of existing commerce systems, but we do a fair amount of work in what we call co-commerce or satellite commerce, very short cycle, very much test and learn driven to be able to do that. Leverage social media and mobile now. I think that's fairly obvious, but do it in a way that's relevant to your brand and your customer base. And then finally, do everything you can to simplify. Simplicity is extremely important. Final thing I want to really say is that, and it's a little bit shameless self-serving, but historically, technology partners have really not understood customer experience or brand experience or actually creativity and design. And a lot of digital agencies who've been your partners in trying to deliver that really have invested in keeping up with technology. And in the current marketplace, we think there's a huge demand for partners and for insight that comes together and looks at the intersection of both customer experience, creativity, and technology. We've got a bunch of our team here today, so I'll take questions now, but if you run into like any of us and you want any questions, please just say hello. Thank you.
Hi, you used to think beyond a single URL as one of your things. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
It's really just thinking that you probably have alternative business models, you probably have constraints in what you want to be able to do, and so there are things that range from how do you enable a device, the choices that you have to make even in mobile. Is it going to be a mobile app, or is it going to be a web-enabled solution? The answer to that question can be very, very difficult. Both have challenges, and we've seen customers prosper in both areas. Thinking beyond just your e-commerce website, thinking about building a second brand or an extension, and thinking about how you go international in a relevant way is really what we're talking about there. No other questions?
Well,
sure. I can't see, so I don't know if there's a microphone going somewhere.
You talked about the organizational silos. Where do you see, or if you're talking to the other retailers, we keep talking about breaking down the silos. What do you see the organizational shift to happen in the next 2 to 3 years? Is it going to be still going to be a d-commerce or e-commerce team, or will it be just merge into a global silo?
Yeah, so I would say that the greatest change we've seen over the last couple of years is a growing partnership between the CIO and the CMO. Almost all of our clients are on the business side of the house, so they really don't understand technology, and typically there's been a battle there. I think we've got to the point where we're seeing most organizations are overcoming those hurdles. There's great partnerships. They're trying to look a little further out than they have in the past. I think as we proceed further, I think it's really what Daniela talked about that Barney's is doing. It's really getting an organization out of channel silos or footwear versus fashion or anything like that when you're thinking about the consumer and how they interact with you. And I think the profound change will be when businesses begin to really focus on consumer expectations and the experience that they want to deliver and how they're going to enable that across all of their touch points. The only way to do that is to get out of those silos.
Hi, are there a few examples you could share of companies who are really doing mobile very well and integrated with their strategy, and kind of from your perspective, what's really making sense?
We have difficulty sharing in many cases. Our clients are very strong about us not talking about a lot of our relationships. So I would probably step back and say from our client experience, we really can't share. I apologize. Some of our clients are in the room, and I think they'll be glad to hear that. daunting not to be able to see art.
All right, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.